All right, we've got some other news that broke overnight for you. The Senate reversed course on a measure that would block President Trump's war powers in Iran. Hours earlier, the president held a heated closed-door hearing with Senate Republicans, and that was after canceling plans to sign a bipartisan housing bill.
I said I'm not signing the housing bill. I want to see what happens. We said, look, the housing bill is housing. I made billions of dollars with housing. I know housing better than anybody, maybe anywhere. It's all about the interest rate. Lower the interest rates, you can have all the housing you want.
Now, we will speak with a lawmaker who backed that housing bill in just a minute, so stay close for that. But first, CBS News congressional reporter Taurean Small joins us from Capitol Hill with more on the backstory here. Taurean, good morning. So what took place in that Senate meeting with Republicans?
Yeah, what I found interesting about this entire chaotic scene that unfolded within hours on the Hill yesterday was the president was set to go to that bill, signing it passed on a fairly convincing bipartisan measure across both chambers, and would have set up the president for a rare bipartisan victory. I think among the measures included in that legislation was one that would cap private equity firms from buying out single-family homes. This is something that's been a cause for concern from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. They talked about that being a part of the housing crisis, but the president said unless the SAVE Act is voted out of the Senate and the House and sent to his desk, he doesn't want to deal with any other legislation to come from these chambers. He made that case to those Republicans in that closed-door lunch meeting yesterday, and that's where things got heated, particularly between him and Senator Bill Cassidy. He asked why a few Republicans in the room voted to support a war powers resolution that passed earlier in the week, even though it was largely ceremonial versus having actual teeth to it. And Cassidy stood up and said, well, if you really want to know, not too many Americans understand the goals of your war with Iran, which led to a back and forth that also saw Cassidy be insulted by President Trump, where he called out the fact that he successfully primaried the Senate senator. This is a bit of what Cassidy had to say when we caught up with him yesterday.
The president didn't want to hear my question, interrupted me. I didn't care to be interrupted. I felt like I was trying to get answers for the American people. And I'm not going to be bullied when I'm trying to get answers for the American people.
A couple of readouts coming out of that meeting. President Trump himself said it was largely cooperative, and he enjoyed most Republicans in the room, except for some. He didn't name them by name, but said he would at a later date. And then we also know that Senator Cassidy had a conversation with some White House officials, including Vice President J.D. Vance, about a longer dialogue on war aims and goals. And then ultimately, last night, we saw another vote for war powers resolution. This one would hold a little bit more weight to it. Cassidy opted to vote against that bill, saying that he got reassurances that he wanted from the vice president, Errol.
Fascinating to see that split, Taurean. How are Republicans in general, though, responding to President Trump's renewed push for the Save America Act? The president insists Republicans can't win elections without it.
Yeah, so there is, I should say, near unanimous support for this in both chambers, at least when it comes to the Republican Party. The problem, though, is there just isn't a mechanism to push it through on a partisan basis. This is something that's been reiterated by Senator John Thune, the majority leader, over and over again. He doesn't have 60 votes necessary to pass it, even if he was to peel away support from Democrats. And it would only be one so far who's expressed interest in joining, which is Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania. Take a listen to how a few Republicans feel about the president hampering any legislative priorities over the SAVE Act yesterday.
The president closed by preaching unity, but he spent the entire hour talking about things which were not exactly unifying.
It is not helpful to him, it's not helpful to the country, and it's not moving the needle if you don't have the votes.
The president had one clear message: Save America Act, Save America Act, Save America Act. That election integrity is so important to this republic that we need to pass that bill, and everything else pales in comparison.
And again, I just have to point out the fact that considering Senate rules, they just do not have the 60 votes necessary in order to get it across the finish line, Errol.
All right, Taurean on Capitol Hill, thank you. We're joined now by Democratic Congressman Stephen Lynch from Massachusetts. He sits on the House Financial Services Committee and is urging President Trump to sign the Road to Housing Act. Congressman Lynch, good morning. Thanks for being with us. This housing bill was a rare moment of bipartisanship that we don't often see in the country. Do you feel now that its future is in jeopardy?
I do, at least temporarily. There's no justification for the president to refuse to sign this. We had 85 senators support it. We had 357 members of the House. That is, as you say, that's a rarity in this Congress with such a divided country. But I think we all agreed that housing is a huge priority. We're short about 7 million units, individual homes in this country. Prices are elevated because of the lack of supply. We solved some problems for our disabled veterans by changing the law. Right now, a disabled veteran may be denied affordable housing because of their disability benefits, their veterans benefits, putting them over the income limit. We cleared that up in that bill so that HUD would have had to change their rule. That immediately would have provided housing for a lot of our disabled veterans. And we have far too many homeless veterans in this country. And that would have been a huge step for all of those disabled veterans.
Yeah, and as well as millennials and Gen Z viewers who say that finding an affordable starter home is out of reach, even if they have full-time work. How then would this bill help Americans get a leg up?
Well, it clears the way for a lot of changes in for instance, modular housing, manufactured housing that have prevented those from coming online. It also it provides funding for some of the community development corporations and housing groups to actually put together parcels of land. It actually creates a database for the first time of all publicly owned properties, so that we are aware of what parcels are owned and often available at lower prices or for no land acquisition costs. So we're doing some of that already on VA property, where we're using VA property and the acquisition costs are zero. So it's allowed us to provide some housing on those sites. So we're trying to expand all of that to just open the pipeline for new housing. The other thing that's not helping is the steel tariffs. We've got a 50% steel tariff right now, so that's driven up construction costs. Trump has a 25% lumber tariff. There are other building materials, aluminum, things like that also have heavy tariffs on them, and that's driving up the cost of that housing, make it more difficult for people, like you say, first-time home buyers to get their first home.
Well, President Trump says, look, pass his Save America Act, which he says is key for Republicans to be elected and re-elected, and then he'll support this bill. If this means keeping the American dream alive for many Americans, would you agree to that?
I'm not sure of your question. The housing bill definitely. Look, housing, I grew up in public housing. My family struggled when I was young, and I don't take having a stable home or a roof over my head for granted. And I serve a lot of people who are still in that position. They're struggling. So yeah, housing is a core element of the American dream, and it is becoming a pipe dream or a very distant dream for a lot of new couples. And also for people who are just trying to find affordable rental property. A good apartment in a safe neighborhood. It's been a real struggle recently. So we've got to get on that problem and actually bring in some solutions. And I think this housing bill, while it didn't do everything we needed, it was a major step forward.
While we have you, Congressman, I want to get your take on what's happening inside the Democratic Party at the moment. We've just seen Democratic socialist candidates winning primaries in places like New York this week. While the party takes a look at itself and says, is this the best approach nationally? What's your view on that? Which is the best way forward for the Democratic Party?
Look, I'm no political expert, but I do know that my colleagues in New York who were running there was a different order of priorities there. I know the Palestinian issue was huge in New York, and you know, it created a lot of the passion around those candidacies and those elections. That is not necessarily the case in other areas of the United States. So I don't know if you can export the energy that was generated by the Palestinian issue and the Gaza issue there, you know, across the country. I think, you know, housing obviously is a big issue. Affordability, food prices, health care. You know, those issues tend to predominate in some of the wider areas, in some of the purple states as well. So, again, I'm not sure how that translates to other parts of the country. Certainly, it's a voice within the Democratic Party, and we hear that loud and clear. So I think it will have some influence on the caucus and our priorities going forward. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Congressman Stephen Lynch, we appreciate you taking time out of your morning to be with us today. Thanks for being here.